There is a very specific trap that catches highly motivated people. You tell yourself you just need to read one more book, finish one more credential, or gain a few more years of industry knowledge before you finally launch your idea. You end up trapped in a waiting room career. This chart shows the timeline society hands us. It looks perfectly logical. You study, you get an entry-level job, you put in the hours to gain experience, you wait for an institution to grant you permission, and then you finally take action. But if you are waiting to acquire perfect experience before you start building, you are already mathematically behind. Ambition compounds with time. The earlier you apply friction to your ideas, the faster you figure out what actually works. We publicly applaud endless preparation. We call it being prudent. We call it doing your homework. In practice, an excessive focus on preparation often functions as socially approved procrastination. It is a highly respectable way to hide. The pursuit of perfect safety through waiting guarantees that the endeavor will be infinitely harder to execute later. Delaying the jump doesn't eliminate the risk. It just shifts it to a time in your life when you can least afford it. We operate on a standard assumption about risk. Starting young is highly volatile, and aging naturally brings safety and stability. But this graph shows what actually happens, a concept called the risk inversion. The dashed line is how we perceive risk decreasing as we get older. The solid curve shows the true cost of failure, which heavily escalates over time. On the far left, at age 20, or at the very genesis of your career, a severe professional mistake mostly just bruises your ego. Your baseline liabilities are practically non-existent. You have no mortgage, no dependents, and a high tolerance for sleeping on a terrible mattress. Move to the right, to age 40. A similar misstep now threatens foundational pillars. A failed venture suddenly risks your rent, your family's stability, and an established personal identity you've spent 2 decades building. You accumulate financial overhead. You build deep-rooted social expectations. You develop psychological rigidity because you are used to a certain standard of living and a specific level of professional respect. Life doesn't become safer as you age. It merely becomes heavier. By waiting, you choose to experiment only after experimentation becomes vastly more expensive. There is a massive structural advantage to youth and naivety. Ignorance of standard institutional rules generates raw momentum. When you don't know how things are supposed to be done, you move incredibly fast. A 22-year-old hasn't been in the corporate world long enough to internalize paralyzing barriers. They don't immediately assume an idea is impossible, and they haven't learned to freeze in terror over what the legal department might say. Society also judges that 22-year-old entirely differently than a 40-year-old taking the exact same action. When you lack experience, your mistakes are read as experimentation. Your obsessive, clumsy emails to investors are interpreted as hunger. You are operating inside a discounted laboratory. It is a fleeting window where the ecosystem actively subsidizes risk-taking and readily forgives your overreach. Even if your early venture completely collapses, the failure still pays dividends. You walk away with a network of useful contacts, sharper pattern recognition, and narrative capital. You built something ambitious and survived its failure, which elite career systems value highly. We live with a loud contradiction. Society publicly demands caution, degrees, and a step-by-step ascent, but privately, it deeply admires and highly rewards the raw initiative of those who just move without asking. The feeling of being ready is entirely a retrospective fiction. You look back and decide you were prepared, but in the moment, no one actually feels fully equipped before they take a meaningful leap. That traditional timeline we looked at earlier has a fatal flaw. Legacy institutions allocate legitimacy far too slowly. By the time a committee or a corporate hierarchy decides you are finally ready to lead, markets and peer networks could have already validated your idea 3 times over. Stop waiting for a legacy institution to hand down a credential or validate your ambition. Do not wait for a seat at their table to open up. You must build your own table by producing value immediately. Failing early is rarely a catastrophe. The true danger is waiting until your lifestyle, your obligations, and your status become too expensive to allow for failure at all. Do just enough preparation to identify your first move, and then stop planning. Step out of the waiting room and force your idea into contact with reality. You have a limited window of insulation. take action, and begin building your ideas before the world successfully trains you to be slow.